Sit right there.
What is this place?
Pan America Airstream. 34 feet 7 inches long, 8 feet 5 inches wide. Dimensions which are perfectly adequate for one person. Preferable, even.
This is where you live?
No, I don't live here. This is a storage unit. That would be weird.
That's what would be weird?
I'd like to spend more time here. However, I'm afraid some of my clients might follow me.
Why would your clients follow you? You're an accountant. How do you know what to do here? Why are you prepared for this?
Plus, this is on wheels, which means I can hook it up and be gone in 12 minutes. Usually.
Welcome to Kermode Uncut. I did a blog last week off the back of the release of The Accountant, and it was my list of the top 10 most boring movie titles imaginable. And it was things like The Secret Lives of Dentists and The Town and John Carter. I mean, some of which are interesting films, but very, very boring titles. And I said, come on, what have I missed out? What do you think are the really boring movie titles? Loads of responses came in. Here are just a few of your most uninspiring movie titles. So loads of people said, well, what about Trainspotting and The Shipping News, which I have to say I considered, but I left both of them out because I thought in a way it was too obvious. Plus, I actually really like Trainspotting as a title. This, however, from Steve Sloan. After much deliberation, may I humbly suggest The Lady in the Van, the most boring title for the most wonderfully acted and interesting film. See, I'm slightly divided on that. I actually think The Lady in the Van is a title which is quite interesting, but I understand how it could sound boring. This, from Mark of Cain, not the most effervescent of colours, but a thoroughly enjoyable man versus beast all the same, The Grey. This I like particularly. This is from Michael. The Walk wasn't exactly setting new heights until you saw where he was walking. Grass made me wonder if it was comparable to its growth, but thankfully The Similars was quite unlike anything I'd seen. Boom, and indeed Tish. Simon Dillon wanted to take the discussion in a slightly different way. He said, how about a top 10 film titles that are seemingly completely unconnected with what the film contains? For example, Reservoir Dogs contains neither reservoirs nor dogs, which is fine. Made me think of Tyrannosaur, the Paddy Considine film, which apparently was a big disappointment for lovers of dinosaurs. Moving from that into the subject of incomprehensibility, this from Samandlia. The title of the HUDSUCKER proxy had me running to the cinema. Tim Robbins liked it so much, he went on to star in The Shawshank Redemption next. I did a documentary about The Shawshank Redemption in which Tim Robbins told this story about somebody coming up to him in the street and saying, I loved that film you made. What was it called? The Shawshank Reduction. Now, Jaffe raises a thorny issue, the issue of names. Hugo and Carol are both pretty nondescript, which is a shame because the source materials have wonderfully intriguing titles, The Invention of Hugo Cabret and The Price of Salt. It's probably best to avoid naming your film after your main character unless he or she is A, based on a real person, B, a famous enough fictional character such as Sherlock Holmes or Nicholas Nickleby, or C, at the very least has an interesting sounding name, again like Sherlock or Nick. John Carter, John Wick and Jack Reacher are all terribly boring sounding names, to which Anthony Quinn adds, John Carter was your number one. What about Barry Lyndon? Who would want to see a film about some bloke called Barry, for God's sake? At least Carter was called John. On which subject, this from Mike of Borg, how about M and W? Their makers couldn't even be bothered to think beyond the first letter. Just to wrap up, you remember, as I said at the beginning, this whole thing happened because of me thinking that The Accountant was such a boring title. In response to which, this from Annie Mouse, I started trying to come up with a new title for The Accountant after seeing the clip provided by Mark. I came up with Balance. Doesn't sound any better though. And Vincent Kane says, The Accountant is a name you'd expect a real accountant to come up with after a creative brainstorming session.
So who is he?
The accountant.
Like a CPA accountant?
Not quite.